Hello, hello, hello. This is Justin Rabor, and I am giving a review of a movie, a Nigerian movie, My Father's Shadow. Now, I don't mean to exaggerate, but this is one of the finest Nigerian movies I've seen in a very long time. But take that with a pinch of salt because I don't see a lot of Nigerian movies on principle. I have so far seen My Father's Shadow twice, and that's because the first time that I saw it, I had a lot of questions that I needed answered, and I think most of them got answered on the second watch. My Father's Shadow, in a nutshell, is a story that is set in the year 1993, and it follows the military's annulment of the MK Abiola presidential of the election that MK Abiola won, if you remember. And it tells this story not as a political headline and more as the downstream effect of that event. It goes beyond the headlines and it touches at something raw, and that thing that it touches has to do with family. You know, and to that point, the first thing that we see when this movie opens is family, and it is portrayed in very honest, very stark forms, and I could recognize and empathize with it. Like we see two brothers bicker and play, you know, and you can tell that they are the only two people who are most for each other all the time. Their mom plays the role of a provider, and we do not see her in this shot. She's away, going. She's going to work, and the kids are kind of fending for themselves, pending when their mom returns. So they're kind of used to being, mostly independent. The older brother plays the protector role, but not convincingly because he's still a kid. The younger brother plays the antagonizer and the instigator, and these are archetypes that even I recognize. Even like in my childhood, I played the unconvincing protector while my brother was the instigator. So I definitely felt like a lot of nostalgia watching those kids in the beginning, and then we are introduced to the father. The father is a mysterious figure. Remember, and something that I need to point out in the very beginning of this is this story is told from the perspective of the children, which means that we are entering into this movie through two pairs really of childlike eyes and childish eyes as well. And so when we meet the father, we are introduced to him with a low angle shot, and that makes him tower over us, the audience. And we realize, so at first, I am a little bit like intimidated by him just from the perspective of the child because I'm not sure what the kind of relationship is. And with a title like My Father's Shadow, you can't tell if the father was a good or bad guy. So that's my initial apprehension watching the father. And he takes the kids with him to Lagos, and this is where the story begins. While we're in Lagos, we start to get bits and pieces of what happened, not really what happened, or but like the aftermath of the annulment of the elections. We realize that the father Capo is kind of like a revolutionary man because of the people he met, for example Corridor, and the way Meku speaks of him very admiringly. We know that he's a pillar of his community. So again, the children are being introduced to this aspect of their father in at the same time that we are being introduced to him. So the children are discovering their father and we are also discovering him. So let me give a quick profile of the man Capo himself because I really like him, and I think that there is a lot to be said for his characterization. Um, he's he's one of those really stoic people who believes we have to do what needs to be done, and he keeps moving. Um, Throughout the movie, he has like several nosebleeds, and those nosebleeds tend to coincide with his moment of maximum stress, and it tended to coincide with like discussions of the military action against protesters following the annulment of the 1993 election. We meet Corridor. Corridor seems to be like part of like a group of boys. I don't really know what the boys do, but I'm going to assume that they are like freedom fighters. Capo seems to be part of them, and Corridor tells Capo, we lost men. We lost four men um, during the shooting. And our guy says, that's sad. He gives him money, and the children are, wondering, like, how does my father know all of these people? There is a very beautiful scene where a man, sings in Yoruba and he's crying to Kapo, which terribly unsettles him. Now, I don't understand enough Yoruba, so I can't tell you what that scene says, but I think that it was trying to tell him that in the hierarchy and the balance of life, you have choices, and you are a self-directed agentic entity, which means the choices you choose are the choices you choose. It's not XYZ made me do it. Given the choices before me and the circumstances around them, I chose them. And the idea is, when you have a family to protect, and this is going back to Kapo, and this is going back to the Nigerian spirit, to the parenting, to the way families and communities think about their obligations to their members and to the society at large. It's like, in the case of Kapo, do you fight for Nigeria's freedom, or do you take a step back and be there for your kids? Because fighting for Nigeria's freedom is synonymous with being there for your children, but like in a meta game, you want a better country for your children to grow up in. Or you can come back home and be a more nurturing presence. Obviously, because the children have not interacted with Capo for a very long time, we can be sure that Capo chose to fight for Nigeria. And many, many events in the story, reiterate this point. Um, so where was I? So back to the crying man, it kind of settled, that scene, when they get into the amusement park and the man is talking to Capo, it kind of sets this very somber, you can choose to be a father to your children, or you can choose to fight for the country, but these are not good choices. Like, you shouldn't have to choose either or. You should be present for your children, and you should contribute to your nation. And unfortunately, over time and very all too often, parents have to make that choice. And so Capo is shaken by this, and then subsequently in the story, we are introduced to more context for why Capo is disturbed by this, with the story of his own older brother who drowned in the beach, and we continue to proceed. Right, Capo is in town ostensibly to his old 6 months salary, and needs to get it back so he can take it back to his wife Bola to take care of the children. But there's just so much um so many obstacles. So that's not the point of the story, by the way. I think the point of this story is to show like the general state of upheaval, and the fact that the father came to Lagos with his children because he has unfinished business. And by the way, put a pin on that, because that will be relevant at some point in the story. Anyway, the story ends abruptly, and I'm not doing a lot of scenes justice, but the story ends abruptly because the father has a nosebleed again on meeting some of the soldiers, right? And the soldiers, one of them claims to recognize him, and he says he has never met this man before. And then he's bleeding, and then we cut, and then the children are back in the village, and then we find that next day, or I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell time here, we are witnessing Capo's funeral. And that's how the story ends. It ends on a very low note. It's basically the father takes the children on an excursion around Lagos for 24 hours, give or take. And when we come to, and by we I mean the audience, we realize that the father is dead. It's a bit of a jump cut, really, or a thematic jump cut. And this is the part that gets really interesting. So when I saw the movie the first time, I wrote a bunch of questions on on my Apple Notes, because I'm very easily confused. And one of the questions that I asked was, the father dies from the nosebleed, and I sat down with my friend Chinwe shortly after that, and she hit me with this theory that, oh, Capo has been dead the entire time, and it makes sense, right? It explains so much that is missing, like the gaps in the story. Um, for example, the father mysteriously appears in the village for the first time. You see, when he's ordering food for the kids, there is this lady who walks up to him and she hugs him very heartfelt, like it's a very heartfelt hug. And you can tell that she's shaking to see him, and we don't understand why. But this part is very, very, very clever. And Chinwe was the one who pointed this out to me. When Capo meets with Corridor, Corridor says they don't kill four of our boys. But later on in the Buka, we hear that it's five men who were killed. So from Corridor's perspective, given that he's seen Capo, he's going to say four men are dead. But in reality, five men, the fifth man being Capo. So we can imagine that Capo was frustrated enough about the annulment of the elections that he might have done something about it. And he lost his life in Bunny Camp. And so what we are witnessing is just a spirit, you know. Uh, Let me be accurate here. Actually, there's no way to be accurate because I'm saying I'm in, I'm firmly in conjecture theory 3 now. But it's a spirit that has unfinished business. You know, he comes to bond with his children who he has never really bonded with, as we can tell just from the interactions. He comes to instill virtue in those children, and in the meta narrative, like beyond the story, you know, those children are now these grown adults who, you know, made this movie. And he also wanted to be remembered, which is, I guess, crucial to the point of this movie being made at all. And there's a little anecdote he tells about, you know, his older brother who died, um, you know, in the water, and how his brother haunted his dreams and even spoke through a woman to tell him to remember him. And that's why he named his own son Remy after his older brother, you know. And it seemed to me like that's exactly what was happening. The father did not want to be forgotten, so he had that one excursion with his children, and on the beach he tells them that he's made a lot of sacrifices for them, but in retrospect he thinks that he made the wrong sacrifices, because in sacrificing for them he also sacrificed, you know, being somebody that, you know, they had like a storied history with. It was very sad for me, honestly speaking, because, you know, what is life like? Why are we doing all of this? And if you now, you know, zoom out for a bit and then think about the country, you know, for whom the father fought, and then you think about the states today, this is 2025, that happened in 1993, you know, it's kind of hard not to despair. And because of that, I think that this movie is, you know, is incredibly poignant, and I would recommend that you watch it regardless of how you feel. And even if you don't like it, do watch it. I think that this is a movie that does a few things well. One, the nostalgic elements, and this is done by the props, by the language, by the dress, by this location. You know, there are posters, there's paraphernalia, there's, you know, little trinkets and everything. Just, you know, the this the stage and everything is just very well done. I don't even remember 1993. I don't think I was even conscious in 1993, but I felt like I was there. You know, um, you know, I don't have much to say at this point. I think I've kind of exhausted everything I wanted to say, and maybe most of what I said was absolute nonsense. But I can't shake the feeling that this movie, you know, respected its audience intelligence and their ability to appreciate nuance and to understand that sometimes, and in fact most of the time, making a movie is about specifically designing an emotional cocoon for the viewer to willingly get into. And so for me, the emotional broth that I was served, you know, like I said, nostalgia, you know, poignancy, and also made me think about Nigeria, you know, all the blood that has been spilled to free this country that has been for naught. We do not even remember the people who fought and died for this country. That's an indictment on us, and that's why no one else is willing to do it. So that's one part. And I guess on the final part, is just the fact that what are we like when we hustle, when we struggle, when we fight, when we go out there and we put our lives on the line for people, family, friends, and everything. We might justify it. We might justify, being distant from them because we are in the trenches. But it's like when we come home, when all of this is done, will we still be able to convincingly insist to ourselves that it was all worth it? And to be honest, it's a very complex question for me because I don't know. I don't think I'm useful to anyone, friend, family, whatsoever, if I'm not valuable. And I mean that like in a tangible sense. And that may be, toxic behavior, but I watched that and I thought, yeah, this is why I wouldn't have kids because I can't make that trade off that Capo is wrestling with till the death. And I guess that's just that. Anyway, thank you for indulging me. I hope this wasn't too long. I tend to ramble and to go on and on about the same thing. But yeah, have fun. Please see My Father's Shadow. And if we are close, please tell me what you think. Bye.